For a guy who spent most of his career in a creative industry, there was a lot of times when I was told I wasn't supposed to be creative. See, I came from the advertising industry, and in the advertising industry, a creative person kind of looks like this. And they always have a MacBook, and they're supposed to be creative, right? In fact, it says creative on their business card. Creative for them is not an adjective, it's a noun. They're a creative. And if you've dealt with anyone who's a creative, there's a lot of pressure, right, to be creative. And I didn't have that pressure. I was the other guy. I was not supposed to be creative. My job was to make sure everything ran on time. And there was a point in my career when that used to bother me. Because I thought, I can be creative. I can come up with good stuff. But I was never allowed to. I was never supposed to. But I remember we were in this one meeting, and we had the perfect solution, right? We came up with the advertising campaign, we walked in, we'd done all this research, and the creatives came in and they had their boards and they were presenting the whole thing, and the client asked that one question that you hope you never get in a meeting like that. They sat there, they listened to the whole thing, and then they said, "What else do you have?" They obviously weren't impressed. Now, unfortunately for us, we didn't walk in with a backup plan. So the "what else do you have" question was met with nothing. We had no response. And I was the only one who wasn't so attached to the idea, because remember, I wasn't creatively coming up with it, that I could come up with something else. And so I had to come up with something. All of a sudden, I had to be creative. And I came up with something, and I wish I could tell you that I came up with the awesomest idea and they ended up using it. Actually, I don't remember what I said. But I do remember the feeling. That feeling of finally being able to say something and to be the creative person. I loved that feeling. I wanted that feeling. I wanted to be that person. So I started wondering, why? Why can't I be that creative person? What would it take to earn the creative respect? And around the same time that I started thinking about that question, I came across a video by the same guy who recorded the song that was part of the intro you might have recognized. His name's Ed Sheeran. But move backwards maybe 6 years to a time when Ed Sheeran wasn't the guy. He was just an artist. And in this particular YouTube video, he's in a room and he's playing his guitar. And he's doing the thing that he's been most well known for, which is he's using something called a loop pedal. And as he presses it each time, he adds to the sound. He adds to the beat. That's just him. There's no one else. And as he slowly adds to the beat, he's laying down his own track. A little bit more comes in. That moment when he starts singing, the video moves across, and you see all of these people who are watching him, and they're doing the one thing you would expect them to do, right? They've got their phones and they're recording, because this is Ed Sheeran before he's famous. And they know he's going to be famous, right? So of course they got to capture that moment. And as the video keeps moving across, there's this one person who's just sitting there, tapping his leg with a little cup of water. He doesn't have his phone at all. And then when I saw that guy, I thought in my head, what's wrong with that guy? Doesn't he know that he's in front of Ed Sheeran before he's famous? Doesn't he want to capture that? How selfish could he be that he's not going to share this with all of his friends? But then, right afterwards, I thought, I want to be that guy. Because he's enjoying this show on a level that nobody else is. He's invested in the show, right? He's not trying to capture everything. He doesn't have his phone in front of him. He's in the moment. Because he's in the moment, he's seeing something that no one else sees. The question that raised for me was, what does it take to be a person like this? To be a person who sees what no one else can see. Because if you can see what no one else sees, you can come up with ideas no one else comes up with. And if you can do that, you can be the most creative person in every room. Now, a lot of times when we talk about creativity, when we talk about being innovative, we end up with disruption, right? There's lots of disruption. There's robo-advisory firms. There's disruption in financial services. There's disruption in every industry. And a lot of times we think, well, let's just read the right materials, let's study the right things, and we can predict this disruption, right? We can track where the disruption is going to come from. And then disruption turns out to be goat yoga, which, if you're unfamiliar with, is actually a thing where people go and do yoga and there's goats. Now, like you, when I first heard about this, my immediate thought was, why goat yoga? And then I read an article which didn't do much to explain it to me, but did do a lot to explain the mentality behind it. From someone who was a pioneer of goat yoga who said, goat yoga works because, and this is a direct quote, it's impossible to be sad and depressed around goats. Okay, I mean, I guess there's maybe some evidence of that, maybe not. But we can't predict these things, right? Or we think we can't, because where would that come from? How do you know that this is going to happen first? Now, the problem with thinking about predicting the future is that there's actually a couple things that stand in our way. And the first thing that stands in our way is best practices, because we learn for a long period of time through school and through experience the best way to do something. And I'll take you backwards in history a little bit to a story of a guy named Christopher Latham Scholes, who invented the typewriter, who after he invented the typewriter came up with a pretty big problem, which is people got too good at using his typewriter. And when they got too good, they started typing too fast, and when they typed too fast, the keys would get stuck. So he had this problem. He couldn't make the typewriter faster. He didn't know how. So he did the only thing he could think of, which is he moved the most commonly used keys further apart. He forced people to type slower by putting vowels outside, by forcing people to use their pinkies. And in that way, he figured if they can't type as fast, then maybe the keyboards won't get stuck, and it'll work better. That keyboard design is the QWERTY keyboard design, the keyboard design we all use today. Raise your hand nice and high if you'd like to type slower. Literally no one, right? Why would we? And we don't use typewriters anymore. So, of course, in the 1940s, someone else comes along. His name's Professor Augustus Dvorak, and he says, I can fix this problem. And he reinvents the typewriter, and he humbly titles it after himself, calling it the Dvorak keyboard design. And the Dvorak keyboard design puts all the vowels in the middle. It's optimal. You can type most of the words in the English language much, much faster. And then he goes out and he finds a professional typist, because remember, it's the 1940s, right? That's a job at that time. So he finds a professional typist named Barbara Blackburn, and he teaches her how to use his keyboard, and he enters her into a typing competition, because again, right, they have that at that time. And Barbara Blackburn wins the typing competition with a top speed of over 200 words per minute. So Dvorak proved that his typewriter design, his keyboard design, was faster. Now raise your hand if you use a Dvorak keyboard. Again, no one. We all want to type faster, right? And here's a guy who reinvented the keyboard design, which, by the way, was originally invented to make you type slower. And yet, none of us use it. And in his time, he couldn't convince anyone to use it. And the reason is because our habits are really hard to unlearn. We think we know the best way to do something, and we're stuck with that way. And we can't reinvent. We can't shift fast enough. And it holds us back. The second thing holding us back from the future is we expect everything to happen right away. The expectations are changing from the people around us. Here's a really sad story of people hiring handicapped tour guides so that they don't have to wait in line in Disneyland or Disney World. Because that's how diabolical people have become. But also, how unable to wait in line they are. These are actual whiskeys that are aged for as little as 2 days. Because who wants to wait a couple of years for whiskey to actually mature? Let's just drink it after 2 days. Because we got to have it right now. It's super important. These are some apps to make your life easier. The one on the far side here is to fight parking tickets immediately. Then there's another app that waits on 800 numbers for you or tells you the magic sequence of numbers to press to get to a person faster. And then there's an app called Filled, which has been for the Bay Area so far, which allows you to indicate where your car is parked, tie it to your credit card, and a truck will drive up and refill your gas in your car for you. So you don't even have to go to the gas station. That's on-demand convenience that we're starting to see people demand. Here's a bunch of products that allow you to make cooking easier. So the intelligent oven detects what's in the oven, and then you can just put it straight in there. And the food sniffer, you can hover it over food to tell you if your food is bad. We have a device for that on our faces. And yet, we got to have a food sniffer, because who wants to rely on this when you can get actual proof that your food's gone bad? We expect the impossible because we see it all around us. And this is what your clients see before they walk into that meeting with you, right? They see those impossible things and they think, I should be able to get that. Everybody knows everything about me, right? The third challenge facing us is what I call the believability crisis, which is that it's harder to be believable than ever before. Now, as a person who spent his career in marketing, I have to take a little bit of the blame. Even though I wasn't around when this came up, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Therefore, it must be good for you, right? Must be okay. We have all sorts of ads in the fashion industry that don't make us feel pretty good about ourselves. They make us feel worse, right? Here's an example from Levi's that says, hotness comes in all shapes and sizes. Do those look like 4 differently sized women to you? Kind of looks like a similar size to me. Cocoa Krispies are all natural. Did you know? You can feed these to your kids without any guilt because it'll boost their immunity. How can this product be all natural? Have you ever seen a Cocoa Krispie tree? I don't get it. I don't understand. Evian is naive spelled backwards. Is it a conspiracy? Is this Jersey water that's been repackaged as being from the Swiss Alps? Does it matter? Could we taste the difference? I don't know. It's tough. Maybe if we just told people we were advertising, maybe then it would be okay, right? If we just said false advertising, we were just kidding. It was just a joke. Yes, these are Cheerios. There's no such thing as donut seeds, unfortunately. That would be awesome though, wouldn't it? How cool would that be? But no, that doesn't exist. And so the problem with all this marketing is people think that we're selling them toxic sludge, that we're trying to mind control them. And therefore, they don't trust in the organizations that produce this sort of marketing. Now, media doesn't help either, because in media, we see miracle cures for all sorts of diseases. This was a real story. Chemical in McDonald's fries could cure baldness. Oh, I gotta go out and get some McDonald's fries right now. Because some person who wrote this article said there were researchers who found a particular chemical that could help reverse baldness, and let me see what other products use some of that chemical. Oh, McDonald's fries. Let me rewrite the headline and come up with something new and share that saying McDonald's fries could cure baldness. And people who are skimming headlines and sharing stuff on social media, guess what they share? McDonald's fries, new health treatment, reverse baldness. That's what we get in social media as a result of this, right? Here's another story. New study finds 85% of Americans don't know all the dance moves to the national anthem. Now, if you're familiar with The Onion, it's a satirical news site. So this is a fake headline. But it may as well be real because half of the people who will see this on social media will immediately think to themselves, my education has been awful. No one ever taught me the dance moves. I can't believe it. And they'll start to Google that. They'll go on YouTube and they'll try and find something. Because the real truth has a big media and marketing problem. Because we're faced with all of this stuff, all of these challenges that are in front of us. So what does it really take to predict the future? What does it take to see what no one else sees? And be the sort of person, the sort of expert that can come to your clients and say, look, in 2019 or 2020 or whatever range you're looking at, this is what's going to matter. Well, I call it non-obvious thinking. And non-obvious thinking is something that has driven the last 10 years of my life. So for the last 10 years, I've spent all of this time looking at all of these stories to try and figure out how to predict the future. And every year, I write a new book, and I do the dumbest thing that any author can possibly do, which is I rewrite the same book. So there's only a window of a year. It's like the Guinness Book of World Records, right? Who wants the Guinness Book of World Records from 2016? But unlike the Guinness Book of World Records, the trends in this series are brand new every year. And the reason I do it with my team that quickly is because stuff changes that quickly. And so in January of 2019, the latest version of this report will be out. And every year there's 15 trends. And the process behind delivering these trends, the process behind coming up with it, is something that I think all of us have the capability to do. So with my time left with you, I want to do two things. The first is I want to share a little bit about this process and how you can use it yourself to be able to predict the future. And the second is I want to talk about some of the trends themselves that I think are going to change your business if they haven't already. So when it comes to how to do this, there's a couple things. And they range from finding a way to capture the information you see and put it into a way that you can actually digest it and save it for later consumption. So the way I think about ideas is the same way that frequent flyers think about miles, right? When you fly somewhere, you don't fly somewhere, get the miles, and then immediately turn around the next day and say, okay, where can I fly to next? You save them up. You save them up for a little while until you eventually say, okay, now I have enough miles to go somewhere that I'd like to go. So this is how I read books. I save these colored tabs in order to save interesting ideas. I go to lots and lots of events where I listen to amazing speakers and take notes about what they share. This is what my notebook looks like. A lot of people think it's my passport, but it's not. It's actually my notebook. And this is how I take notes, and I write down notes in that book so that I always have interesting ideas to save. This is me sorting through a lot of those ideas for a photo shoot we recently did for a story that Microsoft put together, and this is how everything gets ranged out. This is how it starts to aggregate out into different themes and different clusters to eventually become stories. And then they eventually become trends, and these are just a couple of the trends, and each trend is named, it has an icon, and is described. And more than that, it's actionable. So we talk a lot about what to do with these trends as we share it. Now, during that photo shoot, one of the interesting challenges that the reporting team came in with is how are we going to show this process visually? How are we going to show all of this work that you do to go through all of these different stories and aggregate everything together and deal with all the overwhelming stuff? And they walked in with a concept. It was a little bit of a crazy concept, but we said, let's give it a shot. So this is the photo that came from that photo shoot of that concept. And no, it's not photoshopped. These are actual Post-it notes that we sat, well, I stood, and they kind of put all over. And there, by the way, I did not know this, but there are such a thing as heavy-duty Post-it notes that are made for outdoor use. So that's what we used here, which are actually stickier than the other Post-it notes. And that's basically what we did. And I wanted to show you this because there's a flood of information, and I'm going to give you a way to actually get a sneak peek at the 2019 report at the end of my talk. So there'll be an interesting way to use your phone to do that. So, and then I'll share another photo from this. But the idea behind this is, how do you take all of this and turn it into something meaningful? Turn it into something that's more valuable. Turn it into an understanding of trends. So let's talk about how all of this data comes into trends and themes and stories. And the first trend I want to share with you is something that we call human mode. And human mode is a trend that points to something that you've already heard about in some of the earlier talks, which is the power of human connection. The fact that people want your advice and they want to work with you because you're human. We can't automate everything, and sometimes we actually need the humanity. Here's a beautiful example of that from a grocery store in the UK that created a slow, relaxed checkout line. Because for some people, they need a little bit of extra time. And all of the trends in the grocery market have been towards automation, right? Self-checkout. Get everything in your basket. Scan it in yourself. Do it all yourself. We don't even need people, right? Amazon's launching entire stores without people. And yet, here's a retail experience that's so beautifully empathetic because they say, you know what? Some people don't want that experience. Some people want something more human. This is another great example of how we can create empathy in certain situations through something as simple as a video with no images and no kind of video segments at all, just words. So I want to play this for you. It's about 1.5 minutes long. And it's probably the most powerful video I've ever seen just using words. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to give them whatever they need. I mean, such a powerful story just with words. And the fascinating thing about it is we can do that when we tell stories, when we share the human side of what we do. We can create that sort of empathy. And it doesn't take a lot of crazy, high-impact video. I mean, video is great. I love video. But you can do it with the right message and with the right story. That's how you can do it. The next trend is something that a lot of people find surprising, which is lovable unperfection. The idea that sometimes if we actually screw up, it might be a good thing. These products are not beautiful products. In fact, quite the opposite. When I used to live in Australia, the slang word for ugly was Ugg, as in Ugg boots, which are named ugly because they are ugly. And yet people love them. People love them because they're comfortable, and comfort trumps everything else. Now this product is clearly unperfect. It's the Hutzler 571 banana slicer, which it might surprise you to learn is the most popular kitchen gadget on Amazon currently, with well over 5,000 reviews from people who are raving about this banana slicer. It's even got huge conversations and discussions about it, including this one saying, does this work better on Brazilian bananas, better than ones from Italy? To which someone replies, can you be more specific? Are we talking about Neapolitan bananas or Tuscany bananas? Give me some details here. I can't answer that just with that. They need some serious details. The most helpful 5-star review has a title that says, this banana slicer saved my marriage. And it talks about how their morning routine has been transformed. Now, of all those 5,000 reviews, not everyone loves it, of course. So there's a bunch of 1-star reviews, including the most helpful rated 1-star review, which has a title that says, this banana slicer does not work! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And underneath the description, it says, all of my bananas curve the opposite direction. In case you hadn't figured it out by now, the entire comment section is a huge competition. And it's a competition among people for who can be the most ridiculous about this most ridiculous product. And the maker of this banana slicer is laughing all the way to the bank because people are actually buying them. I personally have a wholesale account because I've bought so many of them to give to people that now I need to be a wholesaler of these banana slicers. But the funny thing about it is people are looking for those outlets, and they love those things that aren't trying to be more than they are. They're authentic. What happens at the end of every Jackie Chan film? They show you his outtakes. And when you see him sliding down the side of the building and almost falling off the building and this thin rope, and he's like, oh, because he almost fell off and he's really panicking, you recognize the power of what he does. You realize that it's not CGI, he's actually doing these stunts. Anyone know what they used to use for Jackie Chan when he jumped off a 3-story building early in his career before he had big budget movies? What did they used to use to like break his fall? They used to stack up empty cardboard boxes, and this guy would jump off of a 3-story building and those boxes would crush on impact, and that's what would break his fall. That's insane. And when you hear that sort of story, you think, man, this guy has been doing this for such a long time, and he's got such a talent for what he does, you appreciate it. When we see the work, that inspires more trust. What does your math teacher always tell you to do in school? Show your work. Do we show our work now? Or do we just present that monthly statement or that final plan at the end of all of this work and say, here's what we did? Do people appreciate the work that went into that? If you don't show them what went into it, it's tough. Next trend, light-speed learning. Light-speed learning is the expectation that we, as individuals, can learn anything faster. And the story that inspired this trend, or one of them, was a really scary story for me as a dad of 2 kids. And it was of an 8-year-old who decided that he wanted to drive to McDonald's to get takeout because he was hungry. And so he got in a car and he took his younger sister and they drove to McDonald's. And when they got there, the staff at McDonald's looked around because they thought they were being pranked. And when they realized they weren't, they called the cops. And the police came and they interviewed the kid, and they learned that this kid just wanted to get a burger. But they interviewed all these witnesses and they said, yeah, he drove fine, he stopped at the stop signs, he did everything correctly, he made it there. And when they interviewed the kid, he said, I watched a YouTube video and I learned how to drive. This 8-year-old kid watched a YouTube video and taught himself how to drive. And in 10 years, when that kid graduates from high school and his parents say, okay, what are we going to do about college? What do you think that kid's going to say about going to a 4-year college institution to learn everything he needs to know to go out in the world when he learned how to drive in 2 minutes on YouTube? That's the generation we're talking about coming up next. But that's also our mentality, because we can get a YouTube video for fixing our pipes in our house. We can get a YouTube video for doing just about anything. And so we can learn faster. Here's a series of videos, the tasty cooking videos, that show you in 30 seconds how to turn ingredients into a meal. And a lot of people under the table while they're supposed to be in a meeting, they're watching this video because you don't need any sound, right? And they're teaching themselves how to cook. And it's got 500 million views per month. Think about the scale of that. How many people are trying to figure out what the heck they're going to have for dinner tonight? It's a big daily question for most of us. And then Fender, the guitar maker, has figured out that one of the biggest problems with guitar is everyone wants to play and everyone tries and gives up immediately. And I'm a drummer and I've tried to play guitar, and I clearly did my awesome air guitar for you earlier in the show. That was very, very practiced. But what they've realized is when people quit, they don't sell them the next guitar, they can't sell them the amps, they can't sell them anything else. So they need people to stick with it. And they've built this whole online platform to allow you to learn your most favoriteest song, the song that you love, the song that you're learning how to play guitar for, faster. Because if you can learn how to play that song, you'll stick with the guitar. That's the whole motivation behind this whole thing, because we have to teach people how to learn things faster. So the question for you is, how do you help your clients gain that knowledge that you want them to have, either about investing or thinking about retirement or the industries that you're advising them to look at? How do you help them get smarter faster? Because that's a big challenge, especially with how much demands we have on our time. Last trend, approachable luxury. A lot of times when we hear the word luxury, we think of a certain thing. And the thing is, I'm one of those people where if you asked me what is the maximum amount of money I would spend on a pair of sunglasses, I would say $15. Because sunglasses are not an item that deserve to be paid for more than that. But if you ask me what's the maximum amount of money I'd spend on luggage, I'd say, yeah, $3,000 for a suitcase sounds about right. Because that is an item that I believe deserves to be spent money on. Now, everyone has their different criteria for that, right? Some people would say, oh, I would pay lots and lots of money for sunglasses, and I would never spend that much money on a suitcase. Luxury means different things to different people. So now, the Swiss watch industry is struggling because all of these other watchmakers are coming in, and people say, look, I don't want to spend that much money on a watch. I'd rather spend money on other things. Most of us have heard people want to spend more money on experiences, right? Not on products. That's a huge mantra right now in the luxury industry. Here's an example of people who want to spend money on an exercise machine at home that recreates the environment of going to a class without having to go to the class. People want transformative travel. And one of my favorite stories of transformative travel is a hotel that you might never imagine would work. And it's a real place. It's called the Hans Brinker Budget Hotel in Amsterdam, which says they've been proudly disappointing travelers for more than 40 years, boasting levels of comfort comparable to a minimum security prison. They send people to the train station in Amsterdam with signs that say, don't ask me to take you to the Hans Brinker Budget Hotel. They apologize ahead of time for all of the things they're going to screw up, such as losing your luggage, not having the keys ready. They apologize and promise that your immune system will get better by staying there because it's so dirty that the only possible bodily response would be to get healthier as a result. They have cardboard cutouts for things they don't give you. Like combs, hair dryers. Their games room is a Post-it note, so you better get ready to get creative if you're going to stay at the Hans Brinker Budget Hotel. They have asterisks next to everything that's not included, like maid service, curtains, towels, windows, drapes. Where to stay in Amsterdam? Directly below an abandoned mine shaft. And if all of this promotion for this wonderful place wasn't enough to convince you immediately to go there on your next visit to Amsterdam, they have a bold brand promise, which is it can't get any worse, but we'll do our best. Now, it might also surprise you to know that this particular destination is always full, always booked. Why? Why would anyone show up at a place that promises that it's going to be uncomfortable on purpose? Well, it turns out their experience is one that is meant for the story, not for the comfort. And their audience are people who are backpacking through Europe, who don't have a lot of money anyway. They're staying at hostels. And what better story to tell your friends back home than you stayed at the world's worst hotel, the one that makes you healthier because it's so dirty, and you survived. And of course, that's what everyone does, and it works. Am I telling you to be the worst? Probably not. But am I telling you to be different? Yes. Find that point of differentiation. Find that way of delivering luxury in a way that your clients care about. Because it's not going to be the expensive watch for everyone. It might be for some of them, but it's not for everyone. They've been so successful, they're opening another one in Lisbon. Same hotel, lots of new complaints. So they're expanding. But we have to be able to rethink luxury. So I promised you a sneak peek, and this is how to get it. So this is a new facility we just developed and started using, which is you can use your phone, and all you have to do is text the word non-obvious to this code number, 38470. And when you do that, you'll get an automatic response that says send your email address. And once you send your email address, you'll be on the list. And when the 2019 report is ready, before it comes out to the public, you'll get a copy of it. Now, one of my favorite note-taking techniques, by the way, that you'll be able to use throughout the rest of the show is if you have something like this and you feel like you might not have a chance to write it down in time, use your phone, take a photo. It's a great way of taking notes. You never have that moment where somebody puts up 5 bullet points and you get to bullet point number 3 and then they switch slides. Don't you hate that? You won't have that if you sit close enough and you use your phone and you take a photo. It's a great way to get the notes right away. Then you can copy them whenever you want afterwards. So just a little conference hack because I go to so many events. So the point I want to leave you with really comes to this quote, my favorite quote from Isaac Asimov, which is, I'm not a speed reader, I'm a speed understander. What would it take to be a speed understander? Let me give you one last story of how I do that. So I remember coming to something called slow TV in my research. And if you are unfamiliar with slow TV, it's basically an episode of 8 hours of a log burning in a fireplace, or 10 hours of a train going through the mountainside. And it was developed in Scandinavia, and it was so popular there that Netflix actually optioned slow TV. So if you have Netflix, you have slow TV. You have access to it. And when I first heard about this, I thought, who would sit there for that long? It must be like background thing. Maybe it's like that white noise thing that they try and use to get babies to fall asleep. Maybe that's what it is. But I wanted to test it out. So I waited until there was a moment when no one else was home, and I had 37 minutes in between 2 different conference calls, and I said, I'm going to try slow TV. So I put it on, and I had my 37 minutes, and I turned off all my alarms and everything like that, and I was ready, and I watched it for 10 minutes. And my mind started to wander. I started to think about all this other stuff, right? Because it was just a log burning in a fireplace. But then, around the 17-minute mark, I started to get worried. And I wasn't worried for me. I was worried because this fire seemed to be dying down. And I knew in my head that it was going to go for another 8 hours, right? Spoiler alert. I knew that it was going to happen, but I didn't know how. And so I started thinking, well, how are they going to keep this thing going? Because it's just the fire. I mean, the camera's not moving around at all. And as I got into the zone and I started watching it, finally, one of those fire poker things came from off screen, and it moved the logs around to try and make the fire go higher. And the moment that happened, I got excited. I got excited because something happened. And the reason why that was so significant for me was because I was in the zone. I was in the moment where I was paying so much attention to all the details that when something happened, I noticed it. And the challenge that we have all the time, right, in our lives, the challenge we have sometimes in our lives is we have so many things that keep us so distracted, and we're really good at doing this and making sure that we don't kill ourselves or fall off stage while we're doing that. And when we do that, we ignore everything else around us. We become like those kids filming Ed Sheeran. What if we could be that guy with the bottle, with the glass of water? What if we could be the ones who see the world because our heads are up, who could be more observant? What if we could be the ones that see the patterns that no one else sees? I'm going to give you one concrete way to do that immediately when you leave this session. My favorite way to be able to see what other people don't see and to put these pieces together and even to predict the future is to go to a bookstore in an airport or anywhere else and buy a magazine that's not targeted to me. So I will buy Teen Vogue magazine. I'll buy magazines for Hispanic parenting. I'll buy Modern Farmer magazine. Not a modern farmer. But by doing that every single time, I put myself into the world of someone else. I see what ads they respond to. I see the celebrities that I've never heard of. I see topics and stories and all sorts of things that the internet will never serve me. Because the internet is all algorithmic. When you search on Google, a lot of people are shocked by this, but when you search on Google, what you see is not the same as what I see. Because it's customized to you. Everything's personalized, right? And in some cases, that's good, because we want personalized attention, personalized data. But in some cases, it reinforces the same thing over and over again. And so what happens? We read the stuff we agree with. We think everyone who doesn't agree with us is stupid. And there's more division in the world. Sound familiar? The way to get around that is by opening our minds, by being more innovative, by being speed understanders instead of speed readers. And buying magazines can help you do that. So if you can do that, if you can buy magazines, if you can start to see the patterns that no one else sees, I believe you can see what's going to happen. I believe you can actually see trends. And I believe you might just be able to predict the future. Thank you.